Welcome to this special edition of the City Mania podcast, a bonus episode for you right here on a Tuesday afternoon, evening, whenever you might actually be listening to this. I am your host, Chris Belcher. Thanks so much for joining us, and as you heard by the intro music, of course, we're going to talk about Roman Reigns. None of my co-hosts are with me this week, so it's just going to be me on this bonus episode, and I don't want to take up too much of your time, but it is very important, I feel, that we discuss the news that came out on Monday Night Raw last night concerning Roman Reigns. Now, this coming week, our episode on Friday will feature Jared Justice, and returning to the podcast as a special guest is Andy York, and we're going to talk about the 70th anniversary of the NWA. We're also going to talk about Evolution. We're going to get Andy's thoughts on Shawn Michaels returning. We're going to discuss the current product. In that discussion of the current product, we specifically stated that we didn't feel like that anything was going to happen this week that was going to note anything that would be newsworthy, so to speak. We mentioned that on the show, but as we saw last night, things change. So we felt it was important that here on the Nashville Catch Radio Network, the Music City Mania podcast, we wanted to bring you this breaking news special bonus episode so that we could discuss what happened last night. There were rumors circling around yesterday afternoon before Raw. Some conflicting reports came out. One report said that, number one, that John Cena and Daniel Bryan are refusing to go to Saudi Arabia to wrestle. And in that same report, it said that Roman Reigns was injured. He had been pulled off of the live events this past weekend, but he was backstage at Raw. Then a couple hours later, a report came out that said that he was at Raw, he was working out in the ring, and that everything appeared to be okay. Well, judging by whoever reported that, they obviously don't know what they're talking about, because he was working out in the ring for a reason. And that reason being that his leukemia has returned. And he made the announcement to begin Raw that his leukemia after have been in remission for I think 8 years or so, that it's back. He said in his speech on Raw that he was diagnosed with leukemia when he was 22 years old, and he said that he was had just finished his football career at the time. He had a daughter on the way, and he had just been diagnosed with this disease, and he had no idea what to do. And the WWE gave him a chance. I know that on Chris Jericho's podcast, when he interviewed Roman was telling the story about, I believe, him and the Usos. I think they were working in some sort of furniture business where they were building furniture or delivering furniture or something like that. If I'm not mistaken, it may have been a family business as well. But they were working together, and the Usos were going to the WWE. They were just holding this job until it was time for them to go. Roman, on the other hand, didn't really have a direction. And long story short, he kind of sat down and had a conversation with his dad and with the Usos. They encouraged him to give WWE a try. WWE took a chance on Roman, signed him, and made him the biggest superstar in the company, one would argue. So he very much thanked WWE last night for the chance they took on him. He thanked the fans for always reacting to him, whether they cheered him or whether they booed him. He made it a point to say that it was important just for people to react to him, and that is what he wanted. It's just a terrible situation all the way around, to be honest with you. One of the things that made me the most mad, honestly, is that when he was making this announcement and he was talking to the fans about, how he appreciated them and all that, they finally came back with a thank you Roman chant. And it took him announcing that his leukemia was back to get a thank you Roman chant. Just let that sink in for a minute. I know that it's fun to boo a guy, and I know it's, it's all fun and games and that kind of thing. But there is a major contingency of the WWE audience who just doesn't respect Roman Reigns. I don't feel like they do. I just feel like there is a lot of people out there that genuinely cannot stand Roman Reigns, and they don't understand why he's the champion or why he's at the top of the company or things like that. Now, I'll say this. Us here on this podcast, Jared, Jason, Andy, myself, none of us are really big Roman Reigns fans. I mean, we're not like the biggest Roman Reigns fans that you'll ever see in your life. However, the one thing the four of us can agree on is that guy works extremely hard. That guy has talent in the ring. That guy can put on matches. It's just fun to boo him. And I've gotten to the point, honestly, where I've seen him live that I don't boo him anymore. I just kind of sit there and take it all in because of how hard of a worker that he is. And he is talented in the ring. And sure, there are a lot of times when you get the same match with Roman over and over. But if you listen to his peers, how much respect they have for him, how much they know that he works extremely hard at his craft. And now he doesn't care what people think of him. You know, it's important for a reaction, just like he said. Speaking of those superstars, after this was announced, after Roman relinquished the championship and made the announcement about his leukemia, tons of superstars all over social media have given their outpouring love and support for Roman Reigns in this fight with this disease. I mean, you look, Alexa Bliss tweeted, Jericho tweeted, Sasha Banks, Braun Strowman, Bret Hart, John Cena. I mean, there's a bunch of other wrestling personalities. Of course, Renee Young, Sam Roberts, some different people like that. You can just tell what a family that WWE is and what a relationship that Roman Reigns has established backstage with these people. You know, there are also some fans out there that have reported that they've run into Roman in public and he's not been very nice to them. I can't speak to that because, of course, I've never met Roman. I don't know. But I can only imagine just by what everybody else says about him that he's a great guy and that he values the fans. He really does. But it was an incredible, emotional, heartbreaking speech. I encourage you to go back and watch it if you haven't already. The theme of this was woven throughout Monday Night Raw. This was brought up several times, and we'll get to Raw as well because, you know, I want to talk briefly about that because it was definitely a roller coaster ride. But as this is happening, you have Roman making his speech, laying the title down, and he gets ready to come back up the ramp. He gets the thank you Roman chant, like I said. And then his Shield brothers meet him on the stage for a hug and the famous Shield pose. And you can just see the emotion on both Ambrose and Rollins' face. Rollins is clearly fighting back tears. Roman fighting back tears a whole lot during his announcement as well. So just emotional to see those guys. And then they transition over to the announce team. And Renee Young, you can tell, is fighting back tears as she talks about how Dean, which she doesn't mention by name, but says her husband and Roman have been up and down the road together for the better part of 6 years, how close that they've become, things like that. And then Corey Graves talks about how his kids and Roman's kids always play together, and how much of a family man that Roman is. Calls him Moose. Of course, it's what all the Usos and all those guys they call. That's the word for brother, I think, in Samoan. But that's the first time that that's used in reference to Roman this night. And you can see Corey Graves is fighting back tears as well. It's so that was gut wrenching to me, is just to see they know that this is planned. They know that the announcement was planned. Of course, the leukemia is not planned, They know that the announcement was planned. They know that that was going to happen. But at the same time, you can't hold back those emotions in that situation. So throughout the show, they show the clip over and over because this is a thing. This is a huge thing. Roman Reigns has said that he's going to take a leave of absence. And a leave of absence for arguably the top superstar in the company, that's huge. So, of course, they're going to show it throughout Raw. But he's taking a leave of absence to take care of his family, take care of his health. And he made sure in that speech to say that this was not a retirement speech, that he was going to be coming back at some point, which we are all very hopeful that he will. And he'll come back better than ever. So throughout the rest of Raw, you have Paul Heyman coming out because they make the announcement that Brock Lesnar and Braun Strowman will face in a singles match at Crown Jewel for the vacant Universal Championship. You have Paul Heyman coming out, and Paul Heyman openly talks about how much he loves Roman Reigns, how great of a guy he is, and things like that. So you see a real side of Paul Heyman also fighting back tears there. Then later on in the show, we see that we see a little contention between Braun Strowman and Dolph Ziggler and Drew McIntyre. Of course, Drew ended the show last week hitting Braun with the Claymore. So Braun's after him. During the tag match, Ambrose and Rollins challenged Dolph and McIntyre for the Tag Team Championship, but I'll get to that in just a second. So you've got Strowman, who seems like that he's going to be taking that face role from Roman Reigns. It looked this past weekend, of course I said Roman wasn't on the live events. Some folks are reporting that Braun Strowman made the save for the Shield against McIntyre and Ziggler over the weekend. There were some reports that Braun actually faced Ziggler in a match over the weekend. So it certainly appears that they're transitioning Strowman, but at the same time you have to think that Roman dropping the Universal title was not something they had planned on. I don't know exactly what the plans were going to be going forward. If you believe some of the rumors, it was going to be The Rock and Roman at WrestleMania. How incredible that would have been. But you know that they couldn't have known. They couldn't have known that he was going to drop the championship. They couldn't have known, any of this. But it certainly seems like they were transitioning Braun Strowman anyway, so that could lead you to believe that Braun may have captured the championship at Crown Jewel in a babyface role. I'm not totally sure. But I can just imagine the scrambling and how crazy creative was yesterday and, maybe even as early as Sunday, trying to figure out what they're going to do in this situation with their top guy, their champion, having to drop the title. You kind of think about the Shawn Michaels situation in 1997 where he lost his smile. So instead of having a WrestleMania 13 rematch between Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart, they had to scramble. They had to figure something out. It worked out for the better, and Shawn Michaels came back. Of course, that's a point of contention with a lot of people because they believe Shawn was faking his injury. Well, I'm a Shawn Michaels fan, so I don't think he was faking. Anyway, I digress. So, creative scrambles. Creative makes a new game plan. So, we have Brock and Braun going at it at Crown Jewel. The other game plan that it seems like that they scrambled was through the rest of Raw. Now, Raw was actually pretty good. I would go back, highly recommend going back and watching. They had some good segments on there, some really good matches. Some stuff was announced for Evolution that we didn't know about before. So I certainly encourage you to go check that out. But as I said, you have Dean Ambrose and Seth Rollins taking on Dolph Ziggler and Drew McIntyre for the Raw Tag Team Championship in an incredible main event. As I mentioned, Braun Strowman coming out in the middle of it, kind of chasing Drew McIntyre away. And Seth Rollins and Dean Ambrose gets the win. On the night, they came out dressed as a Shield. They came out from the crowd. Representing, doing this in honor of Roman Reigns. They win the championship. And then the turn happens. Just when it was a highly emotional night, everybody is, yes, we're all supporting Roman. We're all behind Roman. We're doing this for Roman kind of thing. Dean Ambrose sours the whole thing. I was texting my co-host Jason Backowitz a little bit ago, and I'll give him credit for this. He said he saw a comment online that said Dean's heel turn was totally obvious until it wasn't. So we've talked on this podcast about how we didn't like the way that the route they were going with Dean's turn, kind of teasing it, jumping back and forth, things like that, hinting that there's dissension within the Shield. And then just when you forget about it, you forget about it because of the realness of Roman Reigns. And that's not saying that WWE used that to their advantage. It just happens to be the way that it worked out. Because you're not thinking about Dean turning anymore. You're thinking about Dean and Seth, and they're all in this together. We're on a united front for Roman Reigns. And then Dean makes the turn. He just goes ballistic on Seth Rollins, beats him down, takes him to the outside, grabs the championship belts, and he says, "Is this what's important to you? Is this what's important to you?" And then he gives him dirty deeds on the exposed floor. He takes up the ring mat, gives him dirty deeds on the exposed floor, and then exits back through the crowd. So it'll be interesting. You'll hear actually on this week's episode, we kind of talked about how you had rivals who were tag team champions at certain points. Example being Shawn Michaels and John Cena, things like that. While Dean and Seth weren't rivals, they were technically on the same side. Now they are, it seems to be. And now they're tag team champions. So that brings up the question of what are they going to do with the tag team championship. Not quite sure exactly how that'll work out. Not quite sure where their feud's going to go. I assume they'll feud for the Intercontinental Championship. What I would personally like to see is them feud for the Intercontinental Championship. Dean take the title off of Seth. Seth go take the Universal Championship. But who knows what's going to happen with that. It's all up in the air at this point. It really is. But I enjoyed Raw last night. Thought it was very interesting. But getting back to the matter at hand, like I said, I wanted to make sure to get in that talk about Raw because it was a good show. And I want you to make sure that you go back and check it out. But the matter at hand is the seriousness and the absence of Roman Reigns. In his promo, he said that he always wanted to be the fighting champion. He always wanted to be the guy that came out, defended his title each and every night, but he said that was lies. He said the truth is that his name's Joe, and he's had leukemia, and it's back, and he can't be that fighting champion anymore. It really made me upset. There was one point where he said, I think he said, "My name's Joe, and I've had leukemia for the last," I think he said 11 years, I think. So the 8 that I said up top of the show was incorrect. I apologize. But he said that I've had leukemia for the last 11 years. And then some idiot fan you can hear in the background says, "Oh, you still suck." There's no need for that. Don't be like that. You could see the point where the fans aren't sure if this is storyline or if this is truth. You can see when it flips. You could hear a pin drop in the place when it flips. You see the camera panning around the crowd. You see the looks on people's faces, and they realize this is 100% serious. That Roman's not kidding. And it just seems like to me, as heartbreaking and as sad as this is, it seems like to me that just every time every time they put the championship on him, every time they finally say we're going with Roman, something happens. Whether it's this, it looked like that before WrestleMania this year when he went down with the sickness there when Kurt Angle filled in for him, it looked like that the fans were really getting behind him at that point. And they were going to put the title on him. They were going to build that towards WrestleMania. And we could argue it back and forth that, he didn't get the championship at WrestleMania for whatever reason. We're not totally sure about that. But it just seems like that every time something happens and he doesn't keep the title for as long as he should. So a lot of people get upset because they're saying Roman Reigns is getting shoved down our throats, when in all actuality, maybe he is, but he's not the champion. And maybe that's everybody's bone of contention, is that if he was the champion, maybe we'd be more accepting of it, but he's not. He main evented, him and Samoa Joe main evented a pay-per-view this past year where AJ Styles was defending the championship against Shinsuke Nakamura. The Universal Championship was not on that show, and Roman Reigns still headlined the pay-per-view. So, I guess that's a bone of contention for a lot of people. I'm not totally sure. What I am sure about, though, is that the wrestling world, whether they want to admit it or not, they'll figure it out in the next couple of weeks if they don't already know, is that they're going to miss Roman Reigns. They're going to miss him on camera, whether they want to admit it or not. They're going to miss good matches on Raw, whether they want to admit it or not. And the other thing that we don't see is what Roman means to the backstage area, what he means to the locker room. Obviously, he's been around for a while, and you can imagine that he's emerged as a locker room leader. If you look on all of WWE's social media sites, they posted a video of him walking back through the curtain and hugging everybody as he's leaving the arena. You see quite a long embrace with Triple H. You see quite a long embrace with Shawn Michaels, who gave him some words of wisdom, no doubt about it, as Shawn has experienced many of these having to go away for a while and come back. You see an embrace with Braun Strowman, who in Braun's social media post, he explicitly says, we may have had our ups and downs on screen, but behind the scenes, he's one of my best friends. You see the social media post from the Usos, it's hilarious. They posted a picture, it looks like a portrait picture that they took, like maybe at a church or some sort of, Walmart or something, wherever you get your pictures taken, of them and Roman when they were growing up. And it's just so, that picture was hilarious. You go check out the Usos' social media, check that picture out. But in any event, Roman's a locker room leader, and that camaraderie backstage is going to be missed. That's for sure. Even Chris Jericho says it was one of his favorite opponents in the ring and one of his favorite people outside the ring. A lot of people, whether fans want to admit it or not, or maybe it's just because they don't know, a lot of people really are good friends with Roman Reigns behind the scenes. And they can't put him over enough, not only about how hard he works, but how great of a guy he is. If you listen to any of those people talk about him, they're going to say whether you like him or not, he's great. And he's going to be the guy that's going to get cheered for a long time. And unfortunately, maybe it took him going away with this illness to come back and people cheer him. I'm not totally sure. Maybe he will get the biggest babyface pop you've ever seen when he comes back. That's the other thing, is we don't know how long he's going to be out. However long it takes to put this thing in remission. He said that the last time when he was diagnosed, he quickly got it put in remission. They quickly took care of it, which is good. You can only hope that they do the same this time. But then again, we don't know how long he's been dealing with the symptoms. We assume it's just recent because it just came out. He wrestled last week. So we assume that this is all just recent events this week, but we don't know. Could be something he's been dealing with over the past couple weeks, months. I don't know. But all of that to say, we here at the Music City Mania podcast, again, I know we're just a little wrestling podcast. I know that, there's several of you out there who listen on SoundCloud. We appreciate that. But, we don't have the notoriety that a Sam Roberts or a Bruce Pritchard or yada, yada, yada. Even a Solid Monster, he's been in the hot news on our podcast recently. Even some of those, next level down guys who, have some notoriety. We're not at that level. But if Roman Reigns or somebody connected to the wrestling business hears this, we just want them to know that Roman Reigns is in our thoughts and our prayers here at the Music City Mania podcast. And we certainly hope for a speedy recovery, because you don't want to wish that on anybody. You don't want to wish any kind of cancer, no matter what form it is or how serious it is, or what stage it is, or if they can just take it out and be done, or whatever. You don't want to wish that on anybody. No matter if it is the guy who gets booed every single Monday or every single pay-per-view. So I hate that it has taken sickness and cancer, leukemia, to open people's eyes about Roman Reigns. But man, I just hope that some people will start thinking twice about how much they boo him. Now, is it now just a thing where it's cool to boo Roman? Okay, maybe it is. And maybe with this thank you Roman chant that came up, maybe that turned them around a little bit. I don't know for sure. But what I do know is that Roman Reigns deserves our respect as wrestling fans for the hard work and dedication that he's put in over the last, I'm sure he's been around since 2010. I'm sure he was in FCW. He was in FCW before NXT, so that's at least been, 2010, something like that. So for the 8-10 years that Roman's been around, he's really worked as hard as he can. I mean, we talk on this podcast about how he's not a great promo guy. He's not. He says suffer and succotash. So until that gets better, we're not going to, he's going to have some work to do. But all that to say, that doesn't mean he doesn't deserve our respect for how hard he works. The guy's a workhorse. The guy's there every single week competing. I'm sure he's wrestled through so many injuries that we can't even count. But the guy deserves our respect for how hard he works for that company. And again, we can only wish that he comes back as soon as humanly possible. Because believe it or not, the WWE needs Roman Reigns. Like I said, I'm sure there's a lot of fans out there that will not believe me when I say that. Send your hate tweets to @BelcherDrums24 or @MusicCityMania. Fine by me. But WWE needs Roman Reigns. And clearly Roman Reigns needs WWE. He loves this business. The business has been great to him. So again, we can only hope that he comes back very, very soon. All that being said, I just wanted to drop in on a Tuesday, give you this huge update about Roman Reigns. He means a lot to the company. He's a great wrestler. Yes, he still has some improving to do, but Vince McMahon has been right way more times than he's been wrong. So we just need to trust his gut about Roman Reigns. That being said, though, we're going to sign off here. Hopefully, we'll be providing you an update soon on Roman Reigns. Hopefully, some good news will surface in the next several weeks. I'm sure it's not going to be a next Monday he's all fine and dandy and coming back. It's going to take a little time. Maybe he shoots to come back as a surprise entrant in the Royal Rumble. Who knows? That would be kind of cool. But in any event, thanks for downloading this special edition. Thanks for listening to this bonus episode of the Music City Mania podcast. Again, I'm your host, Chris Belcher. This coming Friday, we will be talking all about the 70th anniversary of the NWA, that show that went down at the Asylum in Nashville. Jared, Andy York, and myself were there in person, so we recorded a podcast Sunday night afterwards. Again, that's why you're not going to get any recent WWE news on the show this week. So that's why I wanted to drop in here on a Tuesday, talk a little bit about Roman Reigns. So this Friday, check it out. Give us some feedback. We're all over social media at Music City Mania on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can find our show on SoundCloud and on iTunes. Please rate, review, subscribe, download, like, comment, all of those things. We greatly appreciate it. You can shoot us an email, musiccitymaniapodcast@gmail.com. Thanks so much for being with us, and we'll catch you guys down the road.